Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. The RCMP in Alberta say they're reviewing information provided by a man in December 2019 who alleged that his father may be responsible for a missing person in the Banff area. He also believed his father might be linked to numerous missing persons and a homicide in Alberta. Earlier this week, the same man again contacted the RCMP to say that he believes his father may be involved in the murder of Amber Tuckaroo. RCMP say that they investigated the initial allegations and determined that many of the cases the man mentioned had been solved, but Amber Tuckaroo went missing in 2010. Her remains were found 2 years later, and last summer the RCMP apologized to the Tuckaroo family for the mishandling of the case. APTN News has reached out to the family. They say that they're waiting for more information from the RCMP. We'll, of course, be continuing to monitor this story. Follow-up continues from an incident at a Bank of Montreal branch in downtown Vancouver where a grandfather and a granddaughter were handcuffed and detained by police. Here's Tina House with more on that.
As you can see within
the mayor and chief of police are meeting with the police board to discuss a number of issues, including what happened on December the 20th, 2019, when 2 Vancouver police officers were called to this Bank of Montreal branch with a supposed fraud taking place. And what they found was 56-year-old Maxwell Johnson Sr. and his 12-year-old granddaughter, Tori, trying to open up her first bank account. They were handcuffed, detained, and questioned separately. Maxwell and Tori were let go with no charges. We asked Vancouver Police Chief Adam Palmer about his comments that he backed up his officers in handcuffing both Tori and Max, stating that it was a thoughtful investigation.
Hello.
Do you still think it was a thoughtful investigation to handcuff a 12-year-old girl?
Well, I want to give you some context. So just remember, there is a Police Act investigation underway, so I'm limited into what I can say. What I will say is it's clear, and it has been clear ever since it came to light with us in management and with the city, that Mr. Johnson and his granddaughter did nothing wrong. So we're clear on that. They went through a terrible set of circumstances. Everybody feels bad about that. The other part, though, that I do want to emphasize is that when you call 911, doesn't matter who you are, you set off a certain chain reaction.
The mayor of Vancouver and the entire police board will be hearing the transcript of that 911 call made by the BMO staffer later in the day.
They were doing their job responding to a crime in progress, so it's a tough balance. I really care about our relationship with the Indigenous community. I want to make sure that continues to be strong, but I'm also not going to throw my police officers under the bus for responding to a crime in progress that was reported to us.
We know now is that the BMO should never have made that call. They've admitted that, they've apologized. The length that it took them to make that apology and to make that declaration has been really difficult on all of us. So it is good that they've admitted mistakes, but we also have to review as a board, looking at our policy in concerns to this specific matter.
The Union of BC Indian Chiefs are demanding that the 911 call be made public as soon as possible.
The Vancouver Police Department needs to go through some training, cultural training. I think when we talk about competencies, it can't be competencies that people go online and gain their competencies. I think in terms of thoughtfulness, I think these have to be public, and just much like the transcript, the writing will be on the wall.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
The Lake St. Martin First Nation in central Manitoba was in court this morning trying to stop the Red Cross from cutting off living benefits for band members forced to live in Winnipeg after their community was flooded. The Red Cross decided to terminate benefits for 992 evacuees at the end of this month. Lawyers for the community argued there aren't enough homes on the reserve to house all of the families, but lawyers for the federal government say that Canada fulfilled its obligation by building almost double the amount of homes that were originally in the community. Lake St. Martin was one of 4 First Nations displaced by a government-made flood back in 2011. In 2017, residents started returning home, but in that time their families grew larger, resulting in less housing. A judge has reserved her decision until an unspecified date. 3 First Nations in northwestern Ontario are uniting to protect the lands and waters on their traditional territory. Grassy Narrows, Kitchenam-me-Kusibananwag, and Wapaka have signed a mutual cooperation agreement. A press release issued Thursday says the First Nations have agreed to work together in protecting their lands and waters from industrial extraction that threatens the health of their homelands and their way of life. KI Chief Donnie Morris says it's about implementing their own laws.
There are issues that we need to iron out, and that is our protocols and our laws. But they gotta start acknowledging we have laws up here. We shifted. We're not doing things by oral history or by oral talk. We're documenting them legally now. So these will be our laws. They got to be adhered to it.
After 20 years, the longtime secretary of Amnesty International has called it a day. Today, Alex Neve announced that he will step down from the organization. Neve has supported Indigenous rights frequently during his time at Amnesty. In 2003, he asked for an inquiry into Saskatoon Police Starlight Tours after the death of Neil Stonechild. 6 years later, he supported an inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. And most recently, he criticized the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in prisons. In a statement, Neve says that he's not so sure that human rights are better respected now than they were 20 years ago. His last day is on June 30th. Some First Nations leaders in British Columbia have harsh words for the United Nations that's opposing resource development. We're going to tell you all about that after the break. Stay with us.
I'm Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, reporting from the Sahtu region of the Northwest Territories. APTN is touring Coville Lake. We'll interview youth, educators, and leaders on culture and identity, triumph and challenges, oral histories, and what lies ahead for the small but vibrant community.
Starting off on the East Coast, we got -5 and sunshine for St. John's, -3 and sunny in Charlottetown. Cartwright, -12 with sunny skies. Kuujjuaq, -15 and snow. Chibougamau, mix of sun and cloud, and -3 degrees. Rouyn-Noranda, 0. Toronto, snowy and 3 degrees. North Bay, snow and 1. Clear skies for Sulaka, -4. Kapuskasing is snowy and 0. -6 for Norway House with a mix of sun and cloud. -6 and snow for God's Lake. -6 with a mix of sun and cloud in Winnipeg. -2 for Brandon and Dauphin and snow in those communities. 2 in Swift Current and snowing. -1 for Saskatoon and snow. -4 for La Ronge and Buffalo Narrows. We've got some snow in La Ronge. -7 and a mix of sun and clouds in Stony Rapids. Welcome back. The trial of a man charged in a hit and run causing death is underway in Moncton, New Brunswick. Almost 2 years ago, Brady Francis was found dead on the side of the road. The 22-year-old Mi'kmaq youth from Elsipogtog First Nation was struck and killed by a pickup truck. This tragedy has devastated the Mi'kmaq community. Angel Moore has more.
A roadside memorial marks the site where the body of Brady Francis was found. It's just past the gas station in St. Charles, a French community about 10 kilometers north of Elsipogtog. Francis had left a party and was waiting for his parents to pick him up. It was after 9:30 p.m. when his parents arrived to find Francis laying on the road. Shortly after, family friend Jody Millier arrived.
I witnessed, like, pretty much my best friend doing CPR on his son. And it was the hardest thing I can never erase that in my mind.
Francis was pronounced dead on the scene. His mom remembers how cold it was that night.
You know, and when I think of that and I have that feel in the winter, like, and I get frozen, I think of that night. And I can see my son on the road. And that's really hard.
At the family home, a corner of the house is dedicated to Francis. Photos of a life cut short that Jessica Pearlie Francis remembers every day.
All this time, it just seems like there's been I'll just say like a Band-Aid that was in place, and then now it's ripped off again, and the wound is open, and it's fresh all over again.
Francis planned to go back to school. In the meantime, he worked at CC's, the casino in Elsipogtog. He did everything, from dealing cards to stocking the bar. Garnet Augustine, part owner of CC's, says Francis was a social butterfly.
And he was goal-driven. He'd be like, show me how to do this, show me how to do that. I can help you, like he's just like, he's just like a sponge. Like he just takes knowledge and uses it.
Millier called Francis his boy, his first godchild. He says the trial is traumatic, but it's providing answers to the rumors on social media that the hit and run was a deer that got hit.
And then when court came around and the rumor became fact, it actually, I myself, it actually even hurts more. Now I found it was, now it's real pain.
Maurice Johnson is charged with failing to stop at the scene of an accident causing death. He told police he thought he struck a deer. Pearlie Francis hopes the trial will bring closure.
You have to stay strong, you have to keep praying, and that everything's going to work out the way it's meant to work out.
The prosecution wrapped up showing security video of the road where Francis was found, establishing a timeline of the accident, which was challenged by the defense. The trial resumes Friday and is scheduled till the end of January. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Elsipogtog First Nation.
Lots of eyes have been on the Wet'suwet'en protests against the Coastal GasLink project in northern British Columbia. The United Nations and the BC Human Rights Commissioner called for the project to be halted. Now First Nations leadership that want the pipeline are speaking out about that. APTN's Tamara Pimentel has that story.
Impact on our members' lives. Chief Counselor of the Haisla Nation, Crystal Smith, says she is dedicated to providing opportunities that benefit her community. And that's why she supports the Coastal GasLink pipeline project.
Both LNG Canada and Coastal GasLink are important to this province and to this country.
But in December, the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination and the BC Human Rights Commissioner called for 3 large-scale resource projects in BC to be immediately shut down, including Coastal GasLink. Smith, who is also chair of the First Nations LNG Alliance, says the UN and Commissioner failed to do their research.
I found it condescending, paternalistic, for an entity to not take into consideration there are First Nations in this country that support development and responsible development. And for the fact that we're finding solutions for our people that no other entity, political entity, has been able to accomplish before. Who gave them the perception that all First Nations were against the project?
And the United Nations Committee chair admitted this week that they did not study First Nations views and were not aware most communities support it. Images of the Wet'suwet'en protest camps have flooded social media and have made national headlines. Smith says it's created division.
The sensationalism provided around the current issue is not solving any problems. It's actually adding fuel to the fire in terms of what's happening within that community. It's dividing the community and it's dividing families. It's ending lifelong friendships. You're put on one side and you're criticized for doing so.
Smith says her community has received a lot of backlash and have been referred to as sellouts.
Our nation by far, and all the other nations, are not sellouts. In fact, I believe that we are investing in ourselves, investing in our future, investing in our culture. In order to address social issues, no First Nation in this country has ever been able to meet the needs of their people based solely on government-funded programs.
The Haisla Nation is at the end of the route of the $6.6 billion project near Kitimat. Smith says opportunities like this have proven to bring empowerment to her people.
We're talking about employment, training, that lead to careers, and also the revenues generated back that go back to social programs.
All 20 Indigenous communities along the pipeline route have signed benefit agreements for the project. Some of those councils include hereditary chiefs.
We've balanced the environment and the project. Now it's time to see the project come to fruition.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Kitimat Village.
Canada's energy regulator is hearing from First Nations in southern Alberta this week on the matter of pipelines. Crown-owned Nova Gas, a part of Trans Mountain, wants to expand a natural gas pipeline. The Edson Mainline expansion project would add 85 kilometers of new pipeline. The Canada Energy Regulator says listening to Indigenous people's concerns is essential.
We've found that the knowledge that we gain from these hearings is quite relevant. It's biophysical information, it's historical information, it's information that we wouldn't necessarily have or wouldn't be able to receive in any other way, and it forms a really important part of our consideration, our deliberation, and eventually our recommendation to Cabinet.
We're going to check out a new piece of Inuit art at the Ottawa General Hospital. That's coming up after the break, and here's the rest of tomorrow's weather, this time for the west and the north. To northern Alberta, we've got -1 in snow for Fort McMurray, -3 with mist of sun and cloud in Fort Chip, 5 in sunshine for Calgary, 5 in rain for Medicine Hat, 9s for Vancouver and Tofino, and rain, 4 and rain in Bellacoola, -12 in Fort Nelson with mix of sun and cloud, 1 and snow in Prince George, -22 and sunny for Dawson City, -24 mix of sun and cloud in Beaver Creek, -16 snow for Wrigley, -9 and snow for Yellowknife, -21 for Inuvik, Tuktoyaktuk and Fort McPherson and snow there, -18 for Palatuk and Colville Lake, -29 for Baker Lake, -30 for Repulse Bay, clear skies there. Tallyoak, -37 with clear skies, -28 in Clyde River, -27. Welcome back. A new symbol of hope is on display at the General Hospital in Ottawa. It's a small contribution to reconciliation, according to the artists who made it. APTN's Brett Forrester was at the unveiling.
It's called Sivonik Satinu, which means for our future in Inuktitut. Kiln-formed glass panels change from dark imagery to light to explain Inuit history. Kajuk Kablalik is a co-artist on the project.
It is also a symbol of hope because traditionally they were used in hunts, and hunting is sustenance for our people.
This kayak will never touch water. Instead of seal skin, glass covers a handmade wood frame. It's found a home here in the Ottawa General Hospital, where hope is often needed.
It's a symbol of hope, and it's a symbol of moving forward for me.
Hope is also why thousands of Inuit seek out a new home in the nation's capital. The kayak is here because of a project between Tunga Suvingit Inuit and Arts Network Ottawa. Catherine Cotton is the chair of the hospital board of directors. She says the city should feel like home too.
So what we do at the hospital is our staff try to create something of a home away from home for those patients. And by coming in the doors and seeing a very compelling piece that they can relate to, we hope that goes some measure of the distance in doing that.
The kayak moves from a troubling past, a blizzard, dogs slaughtered by the RCMP, and a child taken by plane to residential school. Alex Angalawak is another co-artist. He says reconciliation can't ignore this difficult history.
We shine a light on our history, so it's Canadian history. It's not just Indigenous history. It's the dark things that happened to us in the past.
The theme becomes more positive as he moved to the front of the kayak, a successful whale harvest, a burning kudlik, and an igloo shining in the sun. The symbolism of the kudlik is particularly apt. Prior to the unveiling, Elder Aiga Aragutsiak remembered a time when the kudlik was her home's only source of heat and light. Just like Aragutsiak's oil lamp, these artists hope the fire of their culture burns well into the future. Brett Forster, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Some gorgeous work there. You can go to our website, aptnnews.ca, for more on that story. You'll find a feature by Brett Forrester with some close-up photos of that art installation. Well, Idle No More swept across Turtle Island just over 6 years ago. Now producers Tim Fontaine and Rick Harp are looking back at how it happened and what it all meant. That's the topic of a special presentation of APTN Investigates tonight. Rick Harp is here to talk to us about the project. So tell me a little bit about how you and Tim approached this project.
Well, as you know, there's many ways to skin a cat, so to speak, and there's lots of ways to tell a story. I think very soon into things, we realized there's such a compelling chronology, like the sequence of events. Some people sort of pick aspects and then talk about it that way, almost abstractly, and we just went, the progression of things and the buildup of things. Why mess with it?
Yeah.
Stick with the flow, the progression of it, with occasional sidesteps to sort of say, oh, by the way, you know, parenthetically, let's get into this a little bit more. But that was the approach pretty early on in the 2 years it took to make this.
And you guys were reporters on the ground at the time that this had happened. Like, you covered the movement, so you had a lot of that.
Well, more him, absolutely. Me, I was at CBC. I was at CBC Radio, so. You know, I was part of the mainstream media that kind of was more focused elsewhere instead of on the movement. So, but I was out in the street and I had my phone and going, what the? So it was on my radar, absolutely, yeah. No. So definitely Tim was like reliving all these moments, and you actually see him in the documentary.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah.
So, and you guys, this was so big. Like, we were just talking before we got going here that this, you know, it was a lot happened crammed into just 3 months, right?
I know.
So you guys have so much that you had to divide this into it's two different it's two parts of the same documentary. Tell us a little bit about what's in part one, and then what we've got for part two.
Well, it divided so neatly. It's quite something. The first part is, you could call it Genesis. How did I Don't Know emerge? Why did I Don't Know No More emerge? And how did it unfold? How did it grow? And then we pause on December 20th, 2012, the day before the first truly national day of action that included Ottawa. And that begins part two, which is full of crossroads. Crossroads for, you know, the founders, crossroads for chiefs as represented by the Assembly of First Nations, crossroads for Chief Teresa Spence, who memorably went on a hunger strike, coincidentally, not as part of the movement and yet somehow aligned and interwoven with it. It was a crossroads for the federal government. It was a crossroads for the RCMP and other security agencies. Like, what do we do? Like, so many crossroads. That's sort of the undergirding theme of episode 2.
Okay, so where and when can people watch it?
They can watch it on the APTN Lumi streaming service. That's the only place you can watch it right now.
Okay.
So you get a 5-day free trial, watch episode 1, and then, you know, $4.99.
Yeah, I know how this works. Once you have them,
that's right. Suck you in. That's where you get it. So just go to type in on your Google machine, watch aptnlumi.ca.
Perfect. Well, I can't wait to see this. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to do so.
Thanks. The Power was with us. I Don't Know More will also air on APTN later in the year, and don't miss the behind-the-scenes sneak peek here on APTN Investigates right after the news. That's your show for tonight. Tomorrow we're back with a sit-down with 4 federal ministers about an assortment of issues that matter to Indigenous people, including child welfare legislation, excluding certain day school survivors from compensation, language funding, and how their party lost, that's the Liberal Party, lost a lot of Indigenous voters between 2015 and 2019. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.